I love that because you you get nowadays I think money is something that like whether you have a little bit or a lot, money is quite easy. Um, but it it's just different, you know. I have definitely I heard and saw where my mom grew up in this little tiny 3 bedroom or something like that farmhouse, single level, like having to get up at 5 a.m. to like pick corn or beans or and like I'm so grateful she was like, nah, not that life for you. Um so yeah, I love that there isn't any equivocation for you, Monica. It's just the answer is no. You don't need that. And that is something that I think a lot of parents can't say. And this brings us to the space where we can really dive into this aspect of soul contracts, because I think one of the aspects of a soul contract that can come up within parenthood is the emotion of guilt and how much you feel like you have to give to them because in some way you like don't do enough for them, as if like, and I have two minds about the sentence I'm about to say, but you've given them life. So like what more is pretty you gotta give? But like there's some, like I said, two minds about that because I also, another part of me is like, no. Just because you gave your child life does not mean you now are like supposed to give everything to them. That's stupid. Um, so I'm interested in your guys' thoughts around guilt. Number one, do you have it? Do you have guilt in relation to your children being a parent? And what does that look like if you're willing to share? And where do you think you are in the healing process around that? And if you feel like you need to go into shame, go ahead, but we can limit it to guilt because I know shame is a little interesting. AnnaMarie, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can start. I definitely have guilt. Oh my gosh, 100% without question, like you're talking about, and I was like, oh yeah, that's me. Um, and I think that it plays an interesting role. My guilt, I mean, I get like typical mom guilt of like, okay, I'm working and she's like home and like I'm not there, but at the same time, yeah, so like it's for everyday things, but then it also goes a lot deeper where, I think it started when I got pregnant, when I was in college and I was like, this is not how it was supposed to go. I don't have the resources. I'm not old enough like I to give this child what I wanted to give like my future children. And then continues to kind of snowball into, you know, she only has me and now I have to fill both of these roles. I have to overcompensate for the fact that like dad isn't here, so I have to play both roles. Um and just the guilt can definitely spiral for me. I have to really take a step back on a regular basis and just be like, I'm doing the best I can. And if she's talking about this someday in therapy, that is okay. That is normal. That is a normal human experience. um, and um, and really just like trying to help myself be present, because I think for me, one of the big things is like I want to try to solve every single problem before it happens, but then at the same time, I'm not able to be present, and then I feel guilty about that. So it definitely plays a role, and I see it especially when I want to say yes to her for what she's like. Oh, I really want this, and I want to give it to her because I'm like, well, at least I can't give her a trip to Disney World, or I can't I drive her to activities because I can't drive. I have epilepsy. And so like there's certain things that she's limited in. So then I want to say yes in all the other ways that I possibly can, because I'm overcompensating. And I want her, I guess um in like kind of in a way, if my brain is like, oh well, if she has these things and she doesn't feel want and she doesn't feel lack, then she won't notice that her dad's not alive, or she won't notice that like I'm struggling, like, and I really make it a point to hide my struggles from her because I don't want her to see them. And I know that that's not necessarily like what I should be doing. But yeah, so it definitely plays a role in how I parent, and I really have to take time for myself and with myself to like take a step back and be like, okay, she's gonna be okay. Like I do know she's gonna be okay. It's just one of those things where, Christina, you said it earlier, how they just mirror everything. I mean, both of you guys said it. Like all of your crap just comes spiraling at you straight in your face, and you're like, "Oh, great, yay!" Um, and so yeah, so that's really how I see it playing.
Christina, thoughts on guilt? You got any?
Oh, I have so many thoughts. So, I can say that part of my healing journey was around generational guilt. Um, my grandmother, my grandmother's my great grandmother. It goes all, as far as, and at least every time I've checked on it, it goes way, way back. Guilt was used as a manipulation tool. It was a way of manipulating the child to do what was being asked. So that was one of the first um, false beliefs that I worked on when I started doing my healing journey, because I did not want to guilt my children into behaving themselves. And still to this day, I catch myself and I'm like, I just did it again, damn it, But at least I can observe it and catch myself and fix it, right? And correct and course correct, because at least that's the beautiful thing about being a parent. Your kids um, are so very present that they don't really notice what happened before. Every once in a while, my older one does. She's like, "Oh, but mom, you used to." And I would say that guilt and shame play a very strong role in parenting, because as AnnaMarie mentioned, um, your kids are your mirror. They show you how you behave, how you respond to stress, anxiety, pressure, um, multitasking, whatever it is that you are working on. They amplify it, and they amplify it with a very sharp knife. Because they're coming at you with it. They're using your triggers to manipulate you to a certain extent. I mean, I love to say that kids, um, know you better than anyone else, because before they could speak, they spent that entire time observing your every gesture and learning it. And all they could understand was your energy. And so they know exactly what your weaknesses and your strengths are, from those early months of being very, very close to you, and all they could do was watch, because they didn't have the language to communicate it. And so for me, a lot of what I have been learning to reparent myself with is letting go of this idea that I don't want to parent the way that my mother parented me, because I don't, right? My mother, while she was a quote unquote stay at home mom, I came along around the time that she was dealing with menopause. And so she was a very absent mother. I really was parented by my older sisters that are 9 and 10 years older than me. And I remember a lot of this because of what I'm going through with my daughter right now, where she has mirrored me to in so many ways of my own childhood, different, right? Because she's her own soul and her own human and having her own experiences. But many of the pressure points that I dealt with as a child, I'm having to watch my daughter have. And what I then have to step back from is she is her own soul going through her own experience. And I'm not parenting the same way. I am very present for my child. And even though that wasn't the case for me. And a lot of times that mother guilt though will kick in, as AnnaMarie was saying, oh, I don't play with her enough, or I don't whatever, or I didn't sit down and play Barbies with her enough, or whatever the case may be. But what I have to dial back is whatever I am doing, that's enough. And I can't allow that trigger that likes to kick in and tell me, oh, but you're being like your mom, you're not playing with her, you're not doing whatever, and pull myself out and be like, okay, but I am doing this that she never did. So, and that's where that reparenting yourself kicks in. So I definitely feel that those of us, and I wrote about this earlier when I knew we were having this podcast, and it was a very channeled message where those of us that chose to be parents pick the hardest job. We're the bravest of the souls because when we have children, we aren't just parenting our children, we are reparenting ourselves for all the trauma that we experienced as children so that we don't put that on our kids and let them have their own experience. And that's a really hard job because we can easily get sucked into it, especially when we see them having very similar experiences to what we had. And so it is being able to step away and be like, you know what, they have to go through what they go through. They have to have their experiences. They have to know that when they come to me, they're safe. And that's the best we can give them. And that is not always an easy line to walk.
Yes.
Because shame and guilt does kick in.
There's something that you said that I'll come back to, but first I want to hear, Monica, what is your thoughts around mom guilt? Do you have it? Does it play? Where are you in that healing journey?
It doesn't play as much as it used to, and I think that just, as you said, Cristina, like once you start healing that inner child, you're just like, yeah, you're not even close to having the hardships that I went through. And it's not like like a comparison, like they should have those. But anytime that kind of like, oh, I didn't give that to my child, and it's just like, yeah, because my child didn't need it, right? There's almost zero guilt now because I know that I am giving them the best that I can actually give them right now. And, when you think, I don't want them to have what I had in my childhood, and if you can really radically look at your life, you can be honest and be like, well, they're not going to have that because I'm going to do my best to make sure that doesn't happen for them. So, and I think I shift a lot of this through, just being an entrepreneur. It's almost like a mirroring, like all my journeys are very mirrored: motherhood, entrepreneurship, and my fertility journey. And all the guilt of, I'm not being present with my kids, I'm at work, I should be with them, all that kind of stuff came up. And then it's finding a balance of, where your kids are in their childhood, how much do you need to actually be for them? Because, going back to your mom's point of, or I think you said it, the kit gloves. And like, I have to be there for my kids at everything. I have to give them everything. Well, that is doing nothing for their adulthood. I think I saw some memes about the whatever generations behind the millennials, and they can't even call for a doctor's appointment. They still will call their mom and like say, hey, call for a doctor's appointment. So if you are doing everything for your children, and I personally feel like if you don't have mom guilt, then you're probably not momming correctly. Like it's just a part of the journey and both of your journeys, right? And I think it's taking that easy way out, like giving the kid the iPad. That's the easy way out. And maybe people have guilt around that, but to be honest, they're probably like, oh, thank God, whatever, the kid's taken care of. Where when you don't give the kid the iPad and then it's screaming, and then maybe you have this battle or you're not giving them what you want, and you're like, oh, maybe making up for something you're lacking in or you can't give them, you physically can't give them, like another parent. I think that's just a natural part of this like soul contract that you're in. And then you humanize it, right? Because you have all your human baggage
Yeah.
that your ancestors gave to you.
Right. So you guys at this point have all brought this up. It wasn't just Christina who brought this up, but this idea of having to like be for your child what I don't even know like how to best like equivocate how you guys were presenting it, because you all kind of presented it a little differently. I'll say it like this. AnnaMarie speaks about like feeling a little guilty about like not playing enough with her kids. And I guess, and Christina about, not wanting to parent in the same way that her mom did, which was kind of an absentee and being like, well, I might not be present in this particular way, but I'm present in this way, and having this. I'm gonna ask you this question because I know how I was raised, and I kind of want everybody else to know. For number one, do you have mom guilt? And two, do you feel like it's necessary to, like, as they were kind of presenting it, like needing to like find these spaces where like you should be like in your opinion, I might be like triggering some people. But it's my podcast, dang it, and I'm gonna do it. Do you think that it's even quote not maybe right or wrong or correct or whatever, but like do you find any value in like AnnaMarie having guilt around like her child only having one parent? And I ask this of you too because you were a one parent household, like we were a one parent household.
So if you look at every household, two parents or otherwise, right? One is doing more than the other, right? Always. There is never a 50-50. And if anybody's telling you there is, they're not looking at their household, right? Because again, I don't know any man or woman that one doesn't work more or one doesn't stay home or whatever. My guilt was not about what I gave my kids because I made it very clear about things like toys. So we would sit down and have a conversation about today I have the money, and when we go into the store, you can each get one toy. And it was a certain amount. There were other conversations where I was like, not today, not today. I don't have the money. I never went into, I got this bill, this is, out of control. Like I never drug them into that. But there was always a conversation about what needed to happen before it went there. And don't get me wrong, these guys all fussed and sometimes, were crying and whatever. But at that point, we left. We left the store. If I had to go back the next day or whatever the case was, there still had to be that conversation. Because again, my thing was boundaries. So my guilt wasn't about what I gave my kids or what I didn't. The guilt was I couldn't find a space in my life to make enough money to not work 80 hours a week. But I didn't take that guilt and I didn't put it on my children. Because I think what happens nowadays, and I watch it over and over, and I watch it with my son, with his child, is that it comes around that you use your child as the guilt trip. Like, if I don't, they're going to do XYZ. So, because I'm tired, I don't want to deal with it. But the answer is if you keep dealing with that same thing over and over and over and over and over again, it never goes away. It just escalates, right? So your kids are more resilient than you know. They may grow up and tell you that you were the worst mom in the world, and you're like, well, you know what? I did what I could. But in there, you guys have to look at yourselves in the mirror and say, what are you feeling guilty about? Because is it really that you can't give your kids a toy or you really can't drive them somewhere? Or does the guilt lie within you that you're not doing something for you? Right? Like, just anything, even like AnnaMarie, and I'm not trying to single you out, right? But like, as that mom that says, I can't drive, I can't this, I can't that, right? You're not the only mom in the world that can't. Scarlett is going to figure out that her mom is the coolest mom out there. Why? Because every day you teach your children something. You teach them something, whether it's you're doing the dishes, you went to work, you wrote poetry, you were, the best, fertility specialist out there. Like, that's what I wanted to teach these guys is I need you to go out in the world and make some kind of impact. I don't care what it is. You don't have to go to college, you don't have to do XYZ, but you do have to take care of yourself. So every one of these guys, when they were 8, they were doing their own laundry. Or they wore dirty clothes. Like, for real, like that was a thing. Like, I never made my kids do chores. Like, that wasn't a thing. I didn't say, it's Saturday, Abby, you got to go clean the bathroom. My expectation for these guys, and still at the ages that they are, if I ask them to do something, I want you to do it now. Because I could have done it myself, right? But I need it done now. So I don't ever have that problem if I ask that they're not willing to be like, okay, I just need to put this down and I'm here. So I think what parents nowadays need to learn is, where is the guilt coming from? Is it guilt about what you don't have? Because your kids don't know any different until you give it to them, right? So if they don't know about the, that you're willing to give them the Barbie, right? They don't know. So they're not going to be like, you won't give me that, right? But a lot of parents now are like, oh, I'm so tired. I'm so tired. I'm just going to get you the Barbie because I don't want to have to deal with the aftermath of what's coming. My fear as a mom was, I don't want my kids to grow up and be not very nice out in the world because I allowed them to do all of these things. So I think guilt plays a role in everything we do, but I still think that parents nowadays really need to look at where the guilt is. What are you guilty? What are you feeling guilty about? Is it really that you can't get her the toy? Or does the guilt come because I'm not out working to get more money to get the child that? Are you feeling guilty that if you don't give that child a toy, that the backlash is really guilt, fear? I'll tell you, one of my children, and it was not Abigail, I was fearful of for a little while, and that played a huge role in what I did and said. And one day I was like, I don't even care. I don't care what happens. Like, I have to have boundaries. I have to do all these things. I will take the backlash of what it is, and I got to move forward. And eventually we moved past it enough where things got better. Is it perfect? No, not even as adults. But somewhere in there, I think we use words and we say things and we kind of use our kids as pawns to get out of things, to feel a certain way, when in reality, it's more about what we did or didn't do for ourselves.
So, guys, I want to just give a little bit more substance to what she's saying, because I want to get your guys' perspective on your thoughts around this, because it still plays into the topic that we're talking about, as far as like what shows up in our soul contract in regards to our children, and emotions is a really huge part of that. Things that we have to work through that present in different ways. So what my mom just made mention of was the fact that for a while she was afraid of one of her children, and it wasn't me, it was one of my brothers. And that fear came from because one of my siblings was incredibly traumatized and was internalizing that trauma in a very negative, physically violent way. And so the fear that they would hurt one of her other children, namely myself or one of my brothers, her, that there was going to be some, weird fugue state where they didn't know what they were doing and it came out in violence, was a very real thing for more than a few moments of my childhood. And that fear was something that had to be worked through for her. And that, so just to give a little bit more solidity to what she's saying, so that, you guys can now think about this, and not just my panelists, but you guys listening. I want you guys to start thinking about, because this is, a place where I want you guys to hear each other's opinions. I want you guys to hear these panelists' experiences, but I also want you to start thinking about how this is presenting in your own life. That, and my role here is to bring you guys, to bring the contract and how it's presenting in your own life to the forefront. I'm not experiencing these things through parenthood, but what I am the expert on this panel is the soul contract. I look at a lot of them, and so understand that what we're speaking about here, and what these lovely ladies, these lovely women, mothers, are expressing to you and telling you and bringing up and showing you in a very vulnerable and like kick-ass way, is how their contract is coming into play right now. So, and through their experiences. So whether it be through guilt, or in this example that we just gave, in fear, and how do you move through that? That is the lesson. The soul contract is lessons that have to be learned, that advance your soul, that advance your spirit, that elevate your consciousness, however you want to phrase that. So now at this point, now that I've made this a little bit clearer, for the rest of you, and Monica, I would like to start with you. Is there any fear for you? And then Cristina, and then AnnaMarie, where do you feel like fear comes in for you in your, whether you want to think about it just in terms of motherhood, or within the confines of soul contract, however you want to do that? How would you answer? What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, right now, the word fear or the emotion fear doesn't like resonate with me. I don't feel right that I have any fear. But that's
Can I ask you a quick question? Do you
yeah.
feel like that's because of the age that you had your children, that you were an older mom? Or do you feel like you had already healed from things that would have caused fear? Or that your children just haven't presented anything that would lead you to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in regards to like your guys' personal story, I'm just not in a situation that would require me right now to have to really overthink my actions, because obviously, it's like if your kid was a druggie at the age of 15, the worst thing for a parent would be like, I gotta let you go because everything that I'm trying to do for you isn't working. So I feel like I'm just not in a situation. My kids are still younger, but yeah, I do think you wisdom just comes with age, right? Especially if you're on a soul's journey or an awakening journey, all that kind of stuff. You just feel more grounded and confident of who you are. So having to fight to have my children and go through all that, and then, like I said, entrepreneurship and motherhood just kicked me through that door even more. I feel like the fear of what could come is made up anyways. Like that would just be stories I'd be playing in my head, and so I don't go there. And then I suppose when I'm faced with that situation, if I ever am, if that's part of the larger contract of like, okay, this is what you have to move through, um I feel like already I've been through enough to understand that the way I move through it is going to be a choice of how I go through that. And those choices are going to be both logical in keeping people who are also in the family or nearby safe. What the person that our children that we have this contract with, keep them safe to my best ability. But then also that surrender piece of letting go, of realizing that these are the things you're moving through together. But yeah, it helps. I think it helps being older. You know, you know, Abigail, I'm sure you are this kind of advanced being. These things, you know, were naturally inside of you, right? But when you get to 42, you'll be even wiser. So I just think with that, that's what's so incredible about aging. And when you realize that, you know, like bring on the 50s. Like I'm stoked. If this is what I know about like 40s, like wow, right? So
Yeah.
just age, it just naturally comes with you. And then the
Mhm.
more you move through that with your children, I feel like no matter what comes up, um, you have the tools, you have the capability, and you don't let the fear overtake the situation.
Christina?
Um, I agree with Monica, but I think that there are innate parts of me that still work on letting go of the worry. I also have to throw my husband into the mix and throw him under the bus a little bit. He's a worrier, and so his energy totally rubs off, and I'm constantly like, I gotta let all that shit go. But my oldest is complicated. She has her complications. She is my spirited child, who mirrors me constantly. However, she does have her challenges. And like right now, we don't want her to continue at the school where she's at. And on Friday, we find out if she is going to get into one of the schools that we applied for. And there is a concern because we know the writing's on the wall that this isn't the right place for her. We need to get her out of there. And it is really now in the hands of the universe to put her in the right school for her. I have no control over it, and I have to let go of worrying about it and trust that the universe is going to provide her with the better opportunity and the right environment so that she can thrive. But I'm still a parent and I'm still a human, and that's probably part of my soul contract. I'm like, oh my god, please let her get into another school because she can't stay in this fucking school any longer. I'm human, you know? And I'm 44 years old, and I can say that, like, there's this concern there that lies right there that is just like, I know this isn't the right place for her, and I need to get her the F out of there. And I'm just like, I'm playing this waiting game right now where I'm like, oh my god, please let her get into another school, dear God. You know, she deserves this win is kind of like what also plays out in my head. Like she's gone through enough already in this school and had really awful experiences already that are definitely part of her soul contract that she agreed to. She's a tough cookie, you know, and she's proven that. And as Abby's mom said, kids are resilient as all hell. And I've watched her, you know, rise from some really traumatic experiences that she began at the age of 8 having. Um, and still, as a parent, you know, as much as we have talked and mentioned about letting the individual have their experience, I'm still a parent watching this transpire, and as an intuitive, feeling into the energy of what is transpiring for my child. And it still fucking breaks your heart, if I'm being perfectly honest. And you know that there's nothing you can do, you just have to be there for them. But that doesn't make it get any easier, if I'm being perfectly honest, right? And that's the work, right? You have to just let it be what it is. But that doesn't mean none of those things exist and that aren't there playing with your head in the background, because they certainly are. And that's why I kickbox and sound bowl and Reiki and do all of the things that I do to help my brain get out of those crazy thoughts. but that doesn't mean they're not there. And um, and yes, there is wisdom in knowing that the fear is what you play out if you allow that energy to hold 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 you. Um, and letting all of that go and trusting that the universe is going to provide the solution better than the one that you would have come up with. Um, and releasing the idea of control. And what I'm explaining right now are all my fucking lessons. So, and yeah, I don't have it all figured out, and I know that part of it really is about learning to let go of hoping that we can control her situation so that she has a better outcome. Potentially, if she doesn't get into another school, it's because she still has more lessons to learn at this one. And as much as I'd like to release her from it, because I know that this environment is toxic for her, perhaps that's part of her contract too. And I have to let that go. Oh, look at Abigail nodding, going, amen.
All right, everybody, we are pausing this conversation just to keep everything easily digestible and to keep you engaged because, we want that. Definitely want that. So thank you so much for joining us for part 2. We will see you in part 3. And if you are interested in seeing the full 2-hour length conversation, no breaks, you can also find that here on my YouTube channel.